welcome everyone. We're back here for another extraordinary episode of Mr. Watt Presents with two of my favorite people, Russell Blackwood, Alex Kinney, producer, director of Thrillpeddlers, working on a brand new show, which we're going to talk about today, and Alex, who also contributed last year to Jules of Paris and is involved with the Untamed stage, the very latest creation of Scrumbly Koldewyn. And we do love Scrumbly. So, Russell, tell us a little bit more. Your midst rehearsals, another week till premiering. How are you feeling about this whole madness down the Magic Theater?
Well, Scrumbly Koldewyn was the composer of the Cockettes musicals, which was a psychedelic drag musical theater troupe that was popular in San Francisco in the early 70s. And he and I had occasion to work together nearly 20 years ago, but it was only about 8 years ago that we started doing Cockettes revivals together. And one of the things that Scrumbly and I discovered early on about each other was we both had a fetish for Weimar Berlin culture. And so this show is a long time coming in that regard. Weimar Berlin is the interwar period between World War I and World War II. And Berlin was the, I would say, center of the universe for defining what the 20th century was going to be like, particularly for kinky freaks.
And that's a period that I particularly love. You may not know this, but back in my old scholarly days, before I entered Freakland,
the glasses tipped me off that you had old scholarly days.
I wrote a thesis about Christopher Isherwood's Berlin Stories, Goodbye to Berlin, and that whole cabaret scene is basically one step at a time led me to slowly California, because Isherwood converted to Vedanta after the whole Berlin craziness. He quieted down and became more psychedelic, and he led the way to the wall.
Well, you know, Isherwood and the film version of Cabaret were my introduction to it as well. At the ripe age of 10, my folks took me to see a double feature at the drive-in, Liza Minnelli and the Sterile Cuckoo, and Cabaret.
Yes.
And my jaw was on the hood of the VW Squareback. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I wanted more.
Yeah,
and then from there, you know, reading Isherwood and wanting to find out even more what it was really like. And it was Mel Gordon's book, Voluptuous Panic, that was my way into that. And Mel Gordon figures in my life in a prominent way since 1988, when his book about Grand Guignol Terror Theater was first released. And that is one of the cornerstones of Thrillpeddlers' work, is this theatrical genre called Grand Guignol. And Mel put the story in English for the first time for American readers, and then ended up doing the same thing a handful of years later for Weimar Berlin with Voluptuous Panic.
And Voluptuous Panic is a highly seminal book that we have got a lot of inspiration from for this production. And Mel Gordon even came to the theater and gave a presentation about his book and his sources and his obscure late 20s German memorabilia.
Yes.
And here's a little excerpt from that presentation.
Excellent.
So here's the coda that someone wrote me, Geek Dominatrix wrote me that she'd been all over Germany looking to figure this thing out. I said, well, I'll tell you what it is. And I wrote this, and she put it on her blog, and then Harper's put it in their monthly magazine of what everything meant. So who knows?
So Russell, the sound is a little bit
here's photographs from those books.
for this recording, which we just recorded off the cuff at a rehearsal. Looking at Mel's images, go ahead and comment as you please in terms of what influenced you in creating this show for us.
Well, the slides that we were just looking at were of boot girls, and akin to the secret code with bandanas out of the backs of gay men's pockets, letting folks know what they were particularly into doing. The boot girls would wear a certain kind of boot, and that would tell you what fetish they specialized in. And it definitely got definitely got specific. You also see here there were Munsies who were pregnant prostitutes, and you would actually go down the street that they work, and the prostitutes would get further and further along in the development of their pregnancy,
And get
so you
higher
could-
rates.
exactly
Bigger belly,
right.
higher rates. The color of the boots reminds me of what's going on at Folsom Street Fair. So clear echo there of San Francisco and Berlin as being sort of call and respond. Right?
Without a doubt. I mean, we're looking at Weimar Berlin as a destination that we've all imagined, and I think there's a question of what if it hadn't stopped being? What if it continued on to this day? But of course, that was not the case.
Yeah, obviously Nazi Germany put an end to that. Alex, we haven't heard you yet, so you're joining this writing creative troupe. The whole show is being written as we speak up until the last minute. What is your function in this show, and does it relate to the Nazi aspect of the 20s and 30s?
Well, as you can probably tell by looking at me, I'm an old warhorse of the theater, So what's really fun for me about what happens with the Thrillpeddlers is that everything is being created on the moment. It's fresh, it's happening now, it's new material, and that is very, very exciting. But I have to say, as I was looking at all of this list of perversions, it took me back to my years of reading dissertation proposals, and I never really got one quite that good, I have to.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, nobody was really doing research into the intricacies of something. So
yeah, that book is phenomenal. Phenomenal book.
It's an amazing amount of research. And to say we weren't there, well, in a way, I was there. I mean, I wasn't there at the period that we're talking about, but I was in Berlin in the mid-'60s. My father took me to Europe when I shouldn't say, but when I was 16, 1965. And then I actually was at the El Dorado Club, which was not the same as it had been in those days. It was in a different place, but it was still, in a sense, the passing down, which was a same-sex dancing club, parlor, I guess you would say. And I think when I went there, they served food and drink, which was actually typical of a lot of these places. So for me, what's really fun about this is being able to dive in, work with young people, of course, who often have really new ways of looking at things, or old ways that I've forgotten, which is even more fun, And so that's a lot of the payoff for me. But, it's fun for me because Russell sort of lets me find places that I might be able to
Because it has
contribute.
to be explained to people. I don't think people realize that behind a show, there's a creative process that may or may not take a long time. But in this case, we pretty much got together, the troupe got together, the writers got together. Scrumbly started writing 2 months ago. 2 a month, maybe 3, right?
Yeah.
And then everything's coming together. I'm lucky enough to have a film segment in there because I'm a big fan of the Steppenwolf, and Russ invited me to do a magic theater piece, which we shot yesterday and started. So I got 5 days to finish it up. So everything is really fast. Everything is coalescing really fast. Talk a little bit more about that creative process and the various artists and artistry involved as a basically community-building theater enterprise.
Yes. So cabaret as an entertainment form and as an art form is made up of a variety of different acts that you'd see over the course of the evening. And it's all presided over by someone called the conférencier, the MC, like Joel Grey in the movie Cabaret.
Right.
He's the conférencier there. And he may give you, he or she may give you a little idea along the way of what to look for in a certain number or coming out of a number, wry commentary on what you just saw, as much as introducing it to the audience and who the performer is. Lots of times these acts were making fun of social manners, of fashion, not often political as one would think. So we have this form of cabaret, and then we have this great interest in Berlin culture, sex, and nightlife. And all of these denizens of the cabaret or the Berlin underworld are who are emerging as the subjects of these songs and as the performers. So there is a song that's sung by a boot girl.
Right.
There's another song that's sung by a sadist. And we, rather than focus on cabaret stars from that period, have focused on Berlin types and specific fetishes to write the songs and create the denizens of our cabaret, the Untamed stage, out of.
Weren't you talking about 4 types of acts that often appeared most commonly? I think there was a mention of rude comedy acts.
Rude
sex-
sketches. There are certainly naked dances,
Right.
comic songs, and tragic songs.
Yeah.
Alex, you're a scholar. You have taught at Columbia University.
I did.
How do you place this theater of the ridiculous movement that Russell is carving with his teeth in the history of living theater?
So I'm going to sort of go a little roundabout because it was interesting to me a minute ago when he was talking about how these songs were songs about the people that were in the scene. And it reminded me actually of the Restoration Theater back in theater history when all of the plays that were written were really about the people who were in the audience and coming to the plays. And it kind of created a glamour in society for the first thing. And I think that's quite true of the Weimar Cabaret as well. As a scholar writer, I mean, I would think of myself as a little bit of a Sunday scholar, but I have been interested in a lot of different kinds of theater. And I think it's really the potential for the wildness of the sense that out of these moments, all kinds of things happened. As we know, historically, some of these things took a tragic turn, but they
Right.
also brought to 20th century life a kind of depth and seriousness and in fact wildness that I think it wouldn't have had otherwise. So it's a very significant movement, you know, in 20th century culture and art.
But are people teaching at universities, are they picking up on this work that Russell is doing here, or does it take necessarily 10, 15 years for them to figure it out? Or you've been in that circle, and where do you think we are in what we're doing here in terms of what the history and the culture feels and represents and understands?
You know, I think it's very interesting what we're talking about in terms of what people look at and study. I don't think it's as widely studied as it ought to be in terms of other breakout movements of the 20th century. You know, in our area, we live in a theater world, an arts world, and movie world where we've been the victims of realism forever. Realism has ruled since the turn of the last century. And a lot of these other movements that were saying, no, life isn't real. Life isn't the next logical thing. It has about it a madness. We're always there, but we're being, in a sense, not looked at as closely. And I think they are now. The question you ask has something to do with what we just saw. It's not easy to find that kind of material. This is not something that you Google and suddenly see pages of. You have to go there,
Right.
be on scene, meet the people who know
it.
something about the material and get to it. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. And it doesn't necessarily fit in with most people's habits or interests of study nowadays.
And Russell, what ticks you? What drives you? What are you trying to do with all this string of shows? What excites you, and what do you wish for?
I think if Thrillpeddlers were to have a mission that I could share with you, it's that there have been theatrical movements, entertainment movements in the past that I'd like to bring into the present day, not in a museum kind of way, but in a way that revives the spirit of something.
Right. I'm with you on that. I think we're starting to see that we're on the same page on that. And I'm very happy to bring into this show, through the film segments in the show, some footage never seen before from the Angels of Light. The Angels of Light were that troupe that sort of sprung from the Cockettes. And there was one filmmaker about them, Jet Jalala. And right as we were starting to talk about this show, I checked in with Jet and asked him if he still had his footage available and if he wanted to make it available to us. And I just opened up Pandora's box. Jet has amazing stuff, and I'm going to show you some of it, which may or may not end up in my final Magic Theater segment. but it's just so beautiful. I'm so honored to crack it open for our audiences for a minute or two and just make them realize where we're coming from. And here it is. It's such beautiful, beautiful footage that I will be playing with in our Magic Theater segment, Pansexual Doors Box segment. And this is Jet, who's still around, lives in the Tenderloin.
And we'll be there opening
Oh,
night.
We'll be there opening night. Is a painter. Paints all these wonderful sets. And gave us the key to his lore to use within the show. So a show within the show within the show. Which is exactly the point that I think we are trying to make.
There's definitely a do-it-yourself aspect to cabaret and to these films that I'm very attracted to. The Cockettes material as well. So much of it you feel was made by the people who are performing it for you.
Right. And it's all made, you know, with very modest means. Within the art, there's always another piece of art. Another piece of art is if you're looking down a fractal prism. And I think that connects us San Franciscans, post-psychedelic culture people, to the 20s and the 30s, where they were peering down the prism of modernity and trying to see, you know, that science is beautiful, but it's also got its opposites working. So if you look at it, like you got the whole duality of the German expressionistic films, the Faustian Dream, the Caligari, where, you know, it's like the first films, but at the same time it's a little scary. So I'm not really sure how to phrase it, but I do know that San Francisco and Berlin are very thematically themed, at least in my history and in the history of cabaret and burlesque.
Yeah, and I like to remind San Franciscans of that we are linked.
There's an interesting little link between our show and the Angels of Light, which is I loved their most famous show, Holy Cow. And we have, not a holy, but I guess you would say a magical cow in the second act, which is really an all-new musical piece.
Yes, tell us more about this feature. I've heard about the cow. I have not really seen it yet develop, but I know it's a dear theme to Scrumbly that already was present in Tinseltots in a Hot Coma. We had some cows watching the train go by.
Yes, that's true.
So Scrumbly's got a thing for cows, and you, as the associate writer, may have come, you know, to chat with him about that motif. So what do you make of it?
Well, I don't know what to make of it. It's very interesting. I just saw a wonderful number last night that's all about the cow and all of her many multiplex ways of giving and receiving pleasure. And I think, to be perfectly honest, without giving away too much, you just have to come and see it.
Well,
I will tell you.
I don't want a spoiler alert, but I have a feeling something's gonna squirt. Oh, it's gonna. All right.
It could happen.
Delete.
So as you were saying, Act 2 of the show is its own one-act music theater piece. It's called The German Thing to Do. And there are several movements that were outrageously popular in Germany in the 20s and early 30s. One is the Wandervogel movement, which began as something for preteen and young teenage boys to get out into the wilderness. So it was like scouting. And eventually this ended up becoming the Hitler Youth Movement. But at the time, there was a pure intention behind it. And from there, it splintered into Wandervogel groups for all kinds of different segments of the community. There's also a group in there that are called brown shorts, but they're named after the brown shirts, the notorious SA, who was the Nazis' private army. I just read, I admit it, on Wikipedia, that the reason that they wore brown shirts and got that nickname is that they bought surplus from World War I, from the German army that would have been stationed in Africa. All of these uniforms were left over at the time, and as a result, the brown shirts became brown shirts.
They did,
and another group is called it's the Wild and Free Gang in our show.
And here they are, right?
Yeah.
So here we got the Wild Boys.
Yeah,
So
and
tell
these
us more
Wild
about
Boys
those
were
guys.
groups of older teenagers, I would say from 13 or 14 up to about the age of 19. Most were runaway or homeless kids who were living in kind of squatters situations on the outskirts of Berlin. And these gangs seem to care a lot about defining themselves through fashion. So a group might all wear paper mache buffalo heads,
I
or
think
be
kinky,
dressed
I
as
mean,
pirates,
we're about to,
or American trappers.
I've seen of them only that spanking scene. So were they sort of kinky and brutal and sort of?
Absolutely. I mean, their work was prostitution and petty crime, but they also had hazing rituals among them that
Gotcha.
were, that were like gang rapes,
And
I
here
guess.
is one more artist that I want to mention, Lynne Rubens Er, who joined us for the very first time, helped us create these props. So give us a little commentary on how these props came to be, and then we will have to finish the show with the trailer and
great.
all the specs for people to go see the show. It opens up this week, and it goes on for 2 months, and it's gonna blow Sam Siskin's mind.
Yeah. April 14th is our first preview. We do 3, and then we have our press opening on the 21st of April. And we're at the Hypnodrome, which is 575 10th Street at Bryant Street in San Francisco, and we're playing through May 28th. You can go to hypnodrome.org to get your tickets. And you asked me one question before I started launching into, here's the details about the show.
The question was about Lynne's puppets.
Yeah,
But
Lynne.
we only have time to end the show on our trailer, and great to have
Lynne's
you guys here.
puppets, ah!
Come see the show, the Untamed stage. Thrillpeddlers is going to be awesome, as Jules of Paris has been, and the many Cockettes shows before, as Tinseltosh and Hakoma, Pearls over Shanghai, and lately The Curse of the Cobra Woman. So come over, get out of your houses, people, and enjoy.
Ich bin ein Berliner, schlag in meinen Kopf, der ist noch gut. Brought to me by some big handsome on a train. Ich bin ein Berliner, cosmopolitan and so urbane, so sophisticated I would fain have my way.